Okay, Mr. Tunde, it's a pleasure to meet you in person. I am really inspired by what you have done, not just for the Nigerian, but for the black one. Seeing you in the places that I have seen you, meeting people that you have met, in the spaces that you have been in, but also with the heart, because I think the heart is what matters in today's world. Like, there are not many people that do what they do genuinely, because I've seen like lots of people use activism in an opportunistic way, but there is real meaning, purpose, and genuineness to what you've done. So I just want to say I salute you for everything that you have done in the last few years.
Thank you so much, my man, for the kind words. I'll take some of the compliment. I appreciate it. Of course, I admire you as well. I think the first time I really got to have a sense of like who you are was when you shared something on X recently, and I thought that was really profound. So, and, I do my best. The world is so much going on, and I think it is important that I'm able to uh, just leave the best part of myself for people in the ways that I can. So I've been on that journey very intentionally for the last 10 years now, and that has brought me to this very moment with you. So I'm glad we are
Beautiful.
going to have this conversation.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, I mean, I'll say you're a man who needs no introduction right now. When we spoke on the phone, trying to schedule this and the logistics, you mentioned that one of your missions here in Paris was you wanted to meet President Macron.
Yeah.
And just that statement in itself, I think, communicates that you're a man of gravitas. But that said, we have a Parisian and European audience who might not be familiar with you. So I'll just give you a chance, maybe 30 seconds to just tell us who you are and why you are who you are.
Okay, so my name is Tunde Onakoya. I'm a dreamer above all things. And like I said, recently, I still believe in what my eyes do not yet see. I'm a person of great faith, in my own ideas, and a person who is very dedicated to using his talent, to help, children find their place in the world. And I say this because I'm a national master of chess. The basic summary is, I came from a very small place, in the world, and chess gave me some leverage. And now I've given the last 10 years of my life to helping other children like me that come from nothing, to find opportunity in life. So what else is interesting about me? I play the piano. I used to play in a jazz band a while ago.
Beautiful.
So I'm a big music person. I love life. I like to see new places. I love books. And I'm just very curious about the world. And of course, I run the Chess and Slums, non-profit organization. It's basically a non-profit that uses chess as a tool to give children, in impoverished communities across Africa, access to education. So I've done that for the last 8 years now, full time. And now I'm going through a personal evolution. So I'm here in Paris for the first time, and I'm happy to be here.
Wow, beautiful. What's your impression of Paris so far?
Cold. I got a cold yesterday, so
Sorry.
a bit too intense. But I think it's beautiful. Wow, it is beautiful. There are no words that can truly describe this. I think another thing I observed is everyone here looks like a supermodel.
yes.
Yeah, because people are too stylish.
Yes.
And,
Well, you fit right in.
I was like, man, I have to step up. Paris is beautiful. I haven't seen a lot of places yet. I've been a bit under the weather, but I'm curious, about the museums, and I'm open to experiencing everything.
Your mantra, I mean, it's on your Instagram bio,
Yeah.
is that it is possible to do great things from a small place. And I think that you're living proof, a living testimony, and the proof of concept is shockingly precise, beautiful, with everything that you have done. I think no one can argue that it's possible, and yesterday I watched a reel on your Instagram and Facebook, and you explained that the smallest chess piece is the pawn.
Yeah.
And the pawn has no choice than to move forward. There is no regressing.
Yeah.
It just has to move. And mentally, I connected that with another mantra that I love by Possible, who is a friend of yours.
Yeah, great guy.
He says, "How can I lose I came here with nothing. And
Mm.
it's like an underdog mentality. Like, we have nothing to lose. I'm a pawn. I can only move forward. I'll move forward anyways. So I just want you I want you to crystallize that ideology of yours a tiny bit.
That is very interesting. So, for those that do not play chess, chess is, it's I believe it's a very interesting philosophy even for life, right? And one of the things that I think is the greatest miracle of chess is the journey of the pawn. Is that the small one can truly become the big one, right? It's like the pawn, just like even the actual practical meaning in real life signifies, it is inconsequential. It is something that can be sacrificed for a greater purpose, right? Right, something that can be used, right? But so inherently, the pawn has like the value of the pawn, right? It's just 1 point, right? So it can be very easily lost in battle, right? Compared to the other pieces, the queen, for example, has 9 points, the rook has 5 points, the bishop has 3 points, the knight has 3 points. But the pawn is the only one that, you know, it doesn't move backwards. It's very restricted in its movement. But that is a miracle in itself, because all the other pieces can move backwards. All right, they have the option of retrieval when the battle is too heated. They can just withdraw, come back, reposition. But the pawn, in its smallness, it doesn't even have the capacity to do that. It can only move ahead on a single file. But the miracle of it is that when it's able to match against all odds, it's able to withstand all of the chaos on the board and make it to the final square, which is the final rank on the board. Something happens, right? It undergoes what we call pawn promotion in chess, where it becomes the most powerful piece on the board, which is the queen. Now, it has the option of becoming anything, aside the king, but it can become the queen. And the moment the queen is reintroduced back into the game, the game is over, right? The moment the queen comes in, the power is unbridled, right? So I guess for me, framing it like that is putting what our lives represent into perspective, right? Sometimes we're a bit uncertain and we face extreme difficulty in the pursuit of our own personal greatness, right? And in a lot of cases, especially when you're coming from a small place, there's no going back home. Because where you're coming from is so much farther from where you're going, right? There's nothing to go back to. You don't even have that choice anymore. So the only thing you have within your purview is what is in front of you. And what is in front of you sometimes can be dangerous, can be uncertain. But the nature of the pawn is that it has to embrace all of the uncertainties in front of it, right? Because it knows that, there is an ending that it is promised. And the only thing that it has to do is to have enough courage to make it to that other side. And the moment it gets there, it becomes something truly unstoppable, truly powerful. So that was what I was trying to frame there, that it is indeed possible to do great things in a small place. And in fact, I believe all great things will start small, right? And it is even physics, the physics of life, and every great monument that we see started with a simple grain of sand, right? It is a necessity that every great thing must begin from a very small place. So I like to think my journey is out of a pawn. It is becoming, in some ways I have become maybe a knight, in some cases a rook. I don't know if I've become a queen yet, but I'm still constantly on that journey. And I think if we all embody this idea, of our becoming, is that we're not defined by like the present value of the pawn, which is just 1 point. But we can truly become the queen, the truly powerful queen, and so that for me is, like I said, the greatest miracle of chess. And it is my journey of becoming.
That's amazing. I really, I love when people see the game beyond the game, even the art beyond the arts. And when I watched that reel and I saw how you explained that, I was like, this is philosophy within chess, and something that I found quite impressive. But again, watching that and even hearing you now got me thinking. You just said you think you have become a knight. I mean, I'm sure you will never say you're a queen, but I think to a great extent, everything that you imagined has come to fruition. So I think then that the pawn stops being a pawn and the pawn becomes something else. In my opinion, the greatest limitation of the pawn is its blessing too, which is options.
Yeah.
You know, you have that you have the and the greatest limitation of being in a small place is options. You have no access. You can only think, and the limitations are, I think, can be internal and external, because some people can never imagine certain things, and some people can imagine things but do not have the resources to execute them. But then eventually that stops being a problem, and you become a pawn or a queen or a bishop, and then all of a sudden, you know, you have more options. So do you think that there is a trickiness to being in a great place? Because now I think that the mantra on a subtle level should be it is possible to do great things from a big place. Because I think right now, even though
like
not say
by the mountain that with great power now comes new great responsibility.
Exactly. So how do you navigate that new trickiness in being in a place where you no longer struggle with limitation, but you struggle perhaps with options?
I think, you know, it is a very interesting contradiction to hold, and I think now when you're in a small place, right, and the journey of the pawn, like I said, is one where, and maybe let me bring this back to my own reality, because I grew up in the slums, like literally in the slums of Ikorodu, a very small place, and I lived the
I've
first
seen the pictures.
21 years of my life.
Incredible. It's incredible.
And when I show people my trophy, they're like, "That's
you
not
look
you."
not. Yeah, you look nothing like
that is
like
me,
that.
and that is my beginning. You know, and it's not one that I'm afraid of showing the world. Like I want the world to know that this is where I've come from. My parents were not educated, so I've come from a really hard place where, you know, a community where education is undervalued, and, you know, I just immediately knew that my fight was different, right? And to truly fight for my place in the world, the one thing I must never lack, you know, we had poverty of many things, of resource. There was a time I had to drop out of school for 2 years. I couldn't go to school. You know, there was a time when our entire family, we shared just one toothbrush. So like all the extreme levels of like poverty, fully experienced it, right? But the only thing I couldn't have was the poverty of imagination, right? And
but sorry, how? Like how?
Yeah, because that's the thing. I don't know how to explain it, but from a really young age, right, I always felt like my mind had become much bigger than what I could see within the confines of my environment.
Was it books?
Books helped me get there to a degree, and maybe to an even greater degree. I think it's also like even the very like architecture of the mind, and in the ways that you see the world, you know, and how you start to understand what your place in the world could be. I always had a deep sense of that. You know when you're a child and people tell you, like, it's like you've been here before, like you're an old soul. So I guess, and even reflects my own name. My name is Babatunde. It's like, and Babatunde is given to a Yoruba child that it's like a reincarnation of like an old man that died in the family just before you were born. And in my case, it was my grandfather. And my dad says that, you know, I speak like him, I look a lot like him. And so I always had that sense of like a life that was much bigger than what I could see. Right, and it wasn't just because of the books I read that expanded that. It was also like my frame of understanding things.
Beautiful.
And a lot of like the values our parents instilled in us, even when we didn't have anything, also went a long way. So now going from that to a place where like there's a lot more ease now, and you now have new perspective, right? And there was something Destiny said in the interview he did recently that resonated very deeply with me. He said there was a time, because you know he works he works in New York, Wall Street, and I guess it was just at a point where he just looked around him and thought that no one in this entire building has the kind of nuanced life that I have lived and my experiences. And it was sort of alluding to him being able to like hold like an interesting contradiction of extreme lack and now a lot of privilege. So now for me, I've come to a place where I have a bit more privilege, a bit more access, a lot more influence. You know, I've done some truly remarkable things that has given me a lot of access. And now, my excuse is no longer that I'm in a small place. Now I have something to lose. I now have a reputation to protect. And so, in a lot of ways, it's much more liberating, right? You know, but also in a lot of ways too, it feels like a trap. Like
Okay.
every success, right,
Mhm.
that you're able to attain, something has to give. You're going to pay the price for it, right? And that is something that it was a bit hard for me to navigate at first, because now people care very deeply about what I say, even if I don't mean it that seriously. People take it very seriously. And I think the second thing now is the stakes are much higher for you to make
Absolutely.
mistakes, right?
Absolutely.
Now, when you're unknown and you have all the liberty in the world to like do a lot of things under the radar, you can make your mistakes very quickly and learn from them, and you're not judged very harshly for it, right? So you have the opportunity to go through many iterations of like doing things, of going through your ideas. But when you're in the spotlight and you've become a symbol that people put on a pedestal, you no longer have that liberty, because the moment you make mistakes, you get the axe for it immediately.
Absolutely.
And you
Absolutely.
immediately begin to feel people's vitriol. And and but then again, it gives you power, right? And power gives you an opportunity to change the world, right? And the way I like to think of it is, when the spotlight is on you, you're on the stage, you can dance freely, you can dance beautifully, and people are in awe of you. But that is not the duty that you should have to use on the spotlight. The duty that you have with the spotlight is to turn it into flashlights, to illuminate other things that need to be seen. And that now feeds into like your own idea of the world, your ideals. Like, what do I want to make seen through me? And for me, in this case, it is the children that I serve, right? Before, before we had any visibility, it was hard to get the resource and support to be able to advocate for them. I had to wait for other people that had the resource and the influence to speak, right, before they could be seen. But now that I've come to a place where the world sees me now, I believe that my most important duty in life is to use that to illuminate the plight, the mission, to get more resource for the children to be seen.
Beautiful.
And what sort of like encapsulated that last year, I took 5 children to America. The year before was my first time in America myself, in New York. And last year I was able to take 5 kids from some of the worst slums in the world and take them to America. One of them won a gold medal at the United Nations
I
Games,
saw that.
right?
Beautiful.
So
Beautiful.
I think that is where I am now, where I have become something. But in becoming something, it means that, I now have a deep sense of duty to help other people become as well. And that is the only way I can justify the privilege that I have now.
Absolutely beautiful answer. So, in many ways, what I get from what what you just analyzed is that there might be harms, there might be difficulties,
Yeah.
but the good you can do with the platform you have outweighs all the harms that emanate
Absolutely.
from stardom. That's really beautiful. Well, I want to ask you, what has surprised you the most about fame? It doesn't have to be good, doesn't have to be bad, but what have you found to be the most surprising aspect of this, this fame, this notoriety of yours?
That's something I haven't really thought of recently, because I've been trying to not believe the hype. uh, I know that I have an extraordinary life, an extraordinary story, but I'm almost stubbornly hell bent on keeping my life as ordinary as possible.
Yeah,
right.
I see
But
that.
maybe one thing that has confused me a lot about fame is that people actually treat you specially. So that really distorts, like it completely distorts like your perception of the world and of people, because you're not going to get the raw experience of life anymore. And I don't know how to maybe frame this. For example, I was in Spain recently, and Spain is well, they say it's an extremely racist place sometimes, and
I lived in Spain for 2 years.
and I know that is very true. But interestingly, I was there for like a little over a week, but I sort of like observed something, because of like I was flown into Spain for like a very prestigious award, and so I was taken to a lot of places, and I observed quickly that a lot of the spaces I was in my entire time, I was almost always the only black person, always the only black person in the room, always the only black person. And these are rooms in which a lot of like interesting conversations about power are made. Honestly, like I was in a room where they were discussing something so serious that I was like, wow, like I'd never been in a room like that before. And in all of those rooms, I'm given a lot of respect, and my opinion is greatly valued, right? Even though I didn't really belong in this place, right? And
I mean, you belong. You
and so
earned it
to a
a great
degree,
extent,
like
yeah.
it's like, so it's sort of like distorts like a typical normal experience for you, like,
yeah.
and which is interesting because 8 years ago, if someone had given me an opportunity to come to Europe through the Sahara Desert, I would have gotten on a boat, and I'm telling you,
Wow.
to escape by all means, right?
Wow.
And of course, you can imagine that my experience there would have been a lot different as like, you know, someone that just came in illegally as an immigrant, and I'm just saying this because it's a very interesting contrast to how I'm now experiencing the world through a deep lens of like privilege and access. And that in some way, I can see how easily it can create a bubble. So that is the very dystopian thing about fame. It keeps you in a bubble. That bubble, you may think it's not that much of it, but no, like it is always in the very subtle, the simple things. And you see that you're completely removed from the reality of what the average person has. And that is what everyone, you know, that stumbles upon this fame, it is something that they have to live through, right? Which is why sometimes I just have to feel a bit of empathy for the actual really famous celebrities. I don't ever want to be that famous because even in the small capacity I have experienced it, right? I have to always remind myself consciously that I don't belong here, right? I can live both dualities, but I want to be able to exist, in the middle, right? That I am the one that gets to stand in the gap between the haves and the have-nots, but to not totally belong to this, that I forget what my roots are, right? But to also not let my roots define, what I think I can become. So it's an interesting middle place to be in. So that would be what I would say. Fame
Really,
puts you
really,
in a
really,
bubble.
really profound. Really,
Yeah.
really, really profound. And when you say you would have gotten on a ship through the Sahara Desert, I have met someone. I lived in Nancy. It's 1 hour 30 minutes from Paris by train. And I met a Nigerian there in a store. My wife is French, but I speak Pidgin with her sometimes playfully. So I was in an Arab store and I spoke Pidgin to her, and a Nigerian heard me and it's like, bros, how far?
My guy.
And I was like, yo, like, why are you here? Nancy, like, I mean, I'm living here because of my wife, like, because she's completing her studies. So why? And he told me that he came with his pregnant wife by the Sahara Desert. He initially was going to go somewhere else and ended up somewhere else, and she was, I think, 7 months pregnant. So I when he said that, it really hits me because, like, he told me I would do it all over again, right? And I understand the place that a person gets to, where that option that looks very terrifying, seems really seems viable, like seems very efficient for purpose. And to imagine yourself in that light as someone who will do something that desperate, to being in the position you are in right now, where you can actually be, with the big guns and in rooms that are very weighty. I think it's really tremendous, and you sit with a very incredible, very weighty, very profound paradox, and I must say it's also really beautiful how you navigate it. Let me ask you this: do you ever miss the small place?
Yeah, sometimes, for very specific things. And the small place also, it leaves some scarring as well. It leaves some trauma. And it can be, so one of the things, so the very first time I really got to like speak globally at a conference, and it was at Munich. It was at the DLD conference. So the DLD conference is one of the biggest tech conferences in the world.
Okay.
And this is places where Elon Musk, Sam Altman, Mark Zuckerberg, they come to speak. And I was invited to be a keynote speaker there. And I felt so out of place because I'm not like a traditional tech person. So I was the only odd person in the entire room,
Yeah.
right? And I was invited to give a keynote speech, and I can tell you that my speech was like almost one of the highlights of the event. Like it was one of the most viewed videos on YouTube,
Beautiful.
and I'm very grateful for that. Not because I'm in any way more intellectual than anyone else that was there. Of course, I'm probably the least intellectual person there, but because there was some meaning to my story that that it made people feel something again, right?
Mm.
And I remember my speech was, the theme was raising a new generation of intellectuals. That was literally what I wanted to talk about.
Mm.
And in that speech, I said something about like 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 my idea and my vision for Africa. Like, what would it mean to raise like a new generation of intellectuals? Like, if we can raise 1 million children from the slums to be critical thinkers and to have this capacity for real critical thought, right? We can reach some level of mass, of critical mass, where those same children would have like a sense of duty. Now, it is important to have that kind of success, like a success that is tied to a small beginning, right? Because you would always have a sense of duty back to where you're coming from. 1 million children that come from some of the worst slums across Africa, that we can hit critical mass. And it is important that we have that kind of success, right?
Mm.
Success that has a reference point, right? Because if this people that we raise from extreme poverty get to a place of power, of influence, of wealth, they would always have a sense of duty to where they come from. And the only reason why I can do
Mm.
the Chess in Slums project is because I grew up in the slums myself, right? And without that context, without that deep empathy for a situation that I know everything about, that I've fully experienced, I would never be able to do what I do right now. So that used to be like something that I held very closely as a reason, for why this project matters. But then I read a book called It Is Our Turn to Eat by this Kenyan author. And it talked about how I made a very good argument for why a lot of like the political class in Africa, why they're extremely corrupt and wicked,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
that it is because they came from poverty. And the moment they go through that, like
Mm.
it's like they're trying to do everything like to never go back to that place. And in some very interesting irony that they become like even worse.
Yes.
They become the
Yes.
very thing,
Yes.
that um that that they're running from. Like it was such an interesting thought, that
Yeah. Yeah.
it made
Yeah.
me think
Yeah.
about it, that
Yeah.
like it is a reason why someone that comes from like a small place, in some way, when they now get access to power, for some reason they sort of like turn their backs, on where they come from. And and that is even one of the things that has probably plagued leadership in Africa,
Absolutely.
in a very ironic sense. So it made me stop to think. And just to bring this back to your question about how the small place can be traumatizing, right? It will leave some scarring with you, right? Because it comes with a lot of like trauma, right? And you would always carry that burden with
Yes.
you all your life.
Yes.
And I started to identify those like patterns in my life. Like for example, when I started to make small money, right, I was always afraid to invest because to me, being rich or having money meant seeing it in your bank account,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
seeing it
Yeah.
there. But like taking risk with that or maybe putting it in the stock market, it didn't make any sense to me. I was like, what if something happens and I lose everything, then I go back to being poor again, right? And I lived with that fear for a long time. It took a lot to actually like psychologically overcome that barrier. And those small things appear in a lot of interesting ways. That is just one example that I gave. Another thing I noticed was that when I eventually got my own place, like a proper place, like growing up, we lived in a face my face apartment, so we never had our own room or a bed. We always slept on the floor, put a mat on the floor. So when I got my place and I got a bed for the first time, for the first 1 year, I never slept on it. I would always prefer to sleep on the floor, on the couch, in the living room. And when people ask me, I say, "Oh, I just prefer it." But it became clear with time that it was because of my childhood. So,
Yeah.
so in a lot of ways, those things they leave like
Yeah.
something that you'd always carry with you.
Absolutely.
And those are even like the very subtle ones, but they're the very deep ones that I don't really want to get into yet, but it leaves something with you. So yes, to answer your question, Do I miss it? Of course I do, because again, it helped me have a deep understanding of life from a place of uh, of just having nothing. So I had uh, a deep appreciation for the little things, right? And it's something I still carry with me. Now it doesn't matter how much I have; it is still the little things. I'm still very sentimental about the little things, that give me the little joys, and I still love them. And most people they will never have that appreciation because they've never known what it means to be hungry before.
Yes.
The only problem they've had is a choice of what to eat and what not to eat. But I've
Yes.
known what deep hunger is.
Yes.
To have nothing to eat,
Yes.
right? To starve.
Yes.
So I'm grateful for the small things. A lot of times I give myself the liberty to experience the small things by going back to where I grew up from, and even the work that I do every single day gives me an opportunity to relate
Beautiful.
with children. But it also helps me have a remarkable story to tell, even when I'm in rooms where. So when I walk into those rooms now, the first thing that I remind myself constantly is that, like, I'm in this place that, like, I'm standing in the gap for the people in a small place from where I come from. So then what do I say? Because they will never be able to make it to those rooms. So I've become in
Mm.
some way a
Mm.
voice, to speak for them.
Beautiful.
So I always carry that
Beautiful.
awareness with me now, right?
Beautiful. So let's talk a bit about money.
Mm-hmm.
I have just one question.
Mm-hmm.
You've been vocal about wanting to be a billionaire, and
Which they dragged me for.
yeah, they did. But when someone like you says they want to be a billionaire,
Yeah.
I think it's a bit more seriously.
Yeah.
'Cause I don't think anyone can accuse you of just being, someone who is very superficial. Like
Yeah.
there seems to be lots of purpose, lots
Yeah.
of drive to everything that you do. So when you
Mm.
come out and you make such a statement,
Yeah.
I believe that you already know that
Mhm.
the impression and the
Yeah.
narrative is that money changes people, and
Yeah.
people tend to demonize billionaires. So
Yeah.
I want to understand your thought process with that, like, and why you believe that money won't do to you what it did or has done and will do to other people.
Hmm. Okay. Um, I remember when I made that statement, right? I said I wanted to be a billionaire, and there was a much fuller context behind. Like, it was a long conversation that led to that point, right? And the reason why I said so was because, again, I've given the last 10 years of my life to doing just one thing,
Yes.
right? Through the Chess and Slums project, which is basically using my talent of chess, and weaving it as a social intervention tool to help children that come from nothing know that there's a place in the world for them, by empowering them with the ability to to uh, to change their own lives, right? Because when you give the child the gift of thinking, you've given them everything that they need to navigate life, on their own,
Absolutely.
right? And I've always believed this, and it is what I've given my heart and soul to the last 10 years. And of course, it is the greatest, like, privilege of my life to have done that, and I'm still doing that actively, right? But what I've realized also with time is that if you want to change the world, someone has to pay for it, right? And again, it was easy for me to pay the full price for this, because when I started, I was very young and naive. I was really young. I was 23 when I started, right? So it gave me a lot of time to fully lean into my
Yeah,
impulses,
yeah.
because now you're young and
There's
I-
also more energy.
there's a lot of energy. So I paid the full price of, like, even though I didn't have money to, like, bring a lot of the ideas to life, I had all the energy. I could make painful sacrifices because, again, I had nothing to lose, right? Of my time, of my life, I gave everything to it. And now it has grown from the small thing where we had like 50 children gathered around to, like, a project where we've reached over
International.
100,000
Yeah.
children over the last 8 years. So, and that comes with a new kind of responsibility, right? And you have to start thinking beyond being the hero of the story. For the first 8 years, I was the hero of the story. And you'd see a lot of people are like, "Oh, Tunde, wow, well done. You're incredible. You're a hero. You're doing this amazing thing for the kids." And for the longest time, I it didn't give me any gratification that I needed, right? But it also reminded me that I was given the world something new to believe in, right? And that is what people want to do. They want to believe in someone. They want to believe in a hero, in someone that represents, like, it's like the people's champ is everything people can't be. Because people understand that, like, you can, like, the automatic or the natural state is to be very selfish about your ambition. I say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be this. I want to have a Lamborghini. I want to have a house. I want to drive a good car. I never had any of those ambitions. My own success was validated through the lives of the children I advocated for. And I lived that life. But I realized that in doing that for so long, right, that it had become the very thing that limited me. And being the hero of the story, that I would always continue to play small by standing on the gap. There was a much bigger way to implement change from a systems point of view, right? Where you can actually build out complex systems that can scale. And that leaves a different level of infrastructure, right? So what that means now is that you become beyond the hero. You cannot be the hero of the story. The hero of the story cannot scale, right? So to now extend beyond that, beyond being a single person, is that you now like create like a system, a world where you institutionalize kindness.
And being a billionaire becomes a consequence of the system.
Exactly. And listen, see, and in institutionalizing kindness is that you're not just the man that people believe in. People believe in your idea of the world. And that has like gone through a different kind of evolution. So for me, it was like, I don't want people to tell me, Tunde, God bless you again. Tunde, well done. Tunde, you are such amazing. No, I don't find any gratification from doing that. What I want to happen, right, is that we're able to create systems, build infrastructure that allows millions of children come to the fullness of what I know they can become. One man cannot do that. The only thing that can do that is power, capital, and influence, right? And this is where you go from being the hero as an individual, right, to being an institution. And to be able to do that,
makes sense.
You can no longer depend on just people's generosity, right?
Makes sense.
Because that is very tied to their whims and caprices. Today, if you say something that people like, they adore you in line. But tomorrow, if you say something that people do not like, and step out of line, then of course you quickly feel that vitriol. So that is very.
I feel you. I know. When I heard it, I saw people piling on that, and I was like, this guy. I feel like there's more to this guy.
Yeah.
So like when I saw the headline, I felt like there's more. Like,
but of course that is it. It's like when. Like, because for the longest time, how we've been able to get support is like a lot of like generous people that donate the cost, which is good. A lot of kind people.
You can't tie yourself to that forever.
But when you tie yourself to that forever, you remain at the mercy of the whims of capital.
Yes.
So you lose your own like identity even in that, in fitting into that box. I'm not saying like the support is not good. It is great. But beyond that, I also began to understand that I have the capacity to actually create value in the world.
Yeah, right? Why not?
Beyond just being an advocate that can tell compelling stories to galvanize support for the children, right? I actually have the mind that is capable of building valuable products and services, being an entrepreneur. Because I know that if we've been able to do so much with Solitude for so long, if I become someone with great capacity, right, that version of me will be able to do so much more. I believe that very strongly. So which was what led me to say that, right? I don't just want to be the charity guy. I want to be the person that also commands resource to be able to bring my ideas to life, right? And that was why I made that statement that I want to be a billionaire, right? Not an unethical billionaire that trumps some people but I want my ideas to create value for society. And in doing that, to become like one that can like serve the haves, then distill that and use the resource, right?
It makes sense.
The have-nots.
It makes sense.
Right. So,
how big is your trust in yourself? In the sense that personally, like I'm Christian, so a lot of the work I do is tied to my belief and my faith in God.
Yeah.
And recognizing my own inadequacy, recognizing that I might have an intention a certain way now,
Yeah.
and that could change over time. And even sometimes observing myself like change in ways that I cannot even recognize. So how do you ground yourself? I ground myself in faith, in God, in holding myself to a higher authority.
Yeah.
How do you ground yourself? Some people ground themselves in themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to know what your own rationalization or calculus is with that.
Faith for me is also a primary thing. I'm a believer, and I believe God gives purpose that suits the very nature of a man. And I think the very nature of who I am, and even my rise from where I grew up to being in this position right now, right, has prepared me for this moment, all of it. And that is the greatest kind of grounding that you need in some ways, right? And every single day I continue to remind myself why all of this matters. Because the last 2 years, I've had to do many things. I've become an entrepreneur. You know, I'm traveling the world. I'm speaking. I'm designing chessboards. I'm doing all of these things. I've become a lot more entrepreneurial, right? So I can, right, raise resource and use it to build a school. Well, literally, we built like a chess innovation hub where we train like thousands of children. So we're doing all of these things now. And to me, it's like, all these other things of like showing up in a certain way, I don't want to do them. Do you know what really makes me happy? Right? Which I've known now that money or power, all of these things will never make me happy. The only thing that makes me happy is what the world does not see. And what the world doesn't see anymore is that when all of this is over, when I leave Paris, when I go back to Yaba, that's where our innovation hub is.
Yeah.
And I walk into our chess center and I remove my cap. And when I remove my cap, I'm no longer the Tunde Onakoya that the world sees. I'm just Tunde. And in that room, I'm with the children. And to them, I'm just their chess teacher. I'm their teacher. And I'm like, children, stop making noise, stop making noise.
I love that.
And that for
I
me
love that.
is beautiful. It's something that I get to keep. It's something that has now become my own personal meaning, like that I get to teach the children. I remember just while I traveled, I was teaching the kids about the Rwandan genocide. Right, I was teaching them about like how, like when, like our difference is weaponized, right? How that can truly become such catastrophic, a catastrophe like it happened in Rwanda, and it was such a deep thing for the kids. But you can imagine how so life-changing it was for them. Like, they asked me a lot of interesting questions, and for the next 2 hours, these are 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old kids, and we had such a great time. And because I know that that is where my real happiness comes from. Beautiful. I know now that everything that I get to do that allows me to be able to do that for these kids, right, will be worth it. And it would always anchor me, right? And like I said, the very nature of who you are is by design. And God intentionally designed you that way, right? That you cannot deviate too far from your nature. It is almost impossible.
I like that. I really, and I see the point, because like when God is taking you to, when God is in a story, He prepares you. Like Joseph, for example, gets to Joseph in the Bible becomes the governor, but before becoming the governor, he goes through 13 years of being in the prison and going through all of that, and when he becomes the governor, I think all of these experiences like make him grounded. And I see similarities here. Like you had 10 years where you went through everything, and like now I think it's fair to trust yourself and to trust the process. That
I have no other choice. I have to.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a final thing. So, and maybe this really puts it into like a much more poetic. It's a much more poetic way to describe it. So I love Khalil Gibran, and I was reading something they wrote about the journey of the river, and it says the river travels through this narrow path, and it arrives at the foot of the ocean, right? And it is said that the river, in seeing the vastness of the ocean, it begins to tremble, right? And it looks back on the path, the narrow path which it has traveled from. It is impossible to go back, right? But the reason why the river becomes so afraid of the vastness of the ocean is because it immediately senses that, like, the moment it like merges with that, it completely disappears into the ocean, right? And it loses itself in that vastness, right? But Khalil Gibran went on to say that the river should not be afraid of disappearing into the ocean, but to be excited to become of the ocean, right? And that to me was like it fully embodied like all of my fears, my anxiety about like me becoming something much bigger than this, and knowing that the world would judge me harshly for it, right? Because I know that in becoming of the ocean, I become the ocean myself, right? And that is the that is how we must like consider our lives. So that at the very least is how I think about my journey, is that when I become of the ocean, you know, the vastness of that gives me so much more power to do so much, right? But I know that my identity will not be lost in that vastness because I have become the ocean in itself, right? So and that for me, I think it's the most important perspective to hold.
I think what you're saying, the way it connects is also why I think infrastructure and systems matter.
Yeah.
Because systems are bigger than you, and you can impact on those systems.
Yeah.
And so you are becoming the ocean, and the ocean is becoming you.
Exactly.
Like through that, the connection and the connectedness of the system.
Exactly.
That's really, really beautiful philosophy. Okay, so Tunde, with being in a great place, in a bigger place, with achievements, visibility, I think naturally, powerful people, like, you know, people who are in the media, people who are loved, people who are doing well. So I think it's quite natural that powerful people want to be seen with you a lot. How do you manage that? How do you manage being in certain rooms? Like, how do you know when to say no, when to care about optics, when to say yes? Like, how do you navigate those very, in my opinion, murky waters?
Yeah, honestly, it is hard. And maybe like a recent example was when I was invited by the president, you know, of Nigeria, and that caused like crazy rock. You know, and it was a long couple of days, you know, for me because like I mean, there had been many instances. For example, like when I met the vice president some 3 years ago, you know, also it caused quite a stir, you know, and when the president invited me, and it was like coming off like breaking the world record and all of that. And it's like, oh, you know, I had been honored, you know, in New York, you know, in a lot of places around the world, and now, you know,
At
the
home.
president of my country, right? And that for me is a civic duty first before anything else.
Okay.
But of course, you know, some people took it very personal because a lot of the conversations now, they're very politically charged, and you just don't want to get caught in the middle of that because people don't care for reason anymore. It's just a very clear political bias. It's like, oh, it's either you're for the people or you're not for them, you know. So I guess I was caught in the middle of that, and it made me understand something, that I was no longer the underdog. Now, people love to root for the underdog, and people like to climb, you know, but also the only thing people love more than seeing a hero rise is seeing him being torn down. And that is just very basic human nature. So which is why, like, it's not something I internalized. I just understood that it would always be like first of all a perception thing, and also again, the moment you sort of like get to a point and people sort of like perceive that, oh, maybe he's no longer one of us, you know, like it evokes a reaction. And which is why objectivity becomes lost, because at the end of the day, right, I can't say no to like the presidency. Like, it's not possible. And of course it caused a reaction. It's just a small group of people that just went bonkers, but also like it made me reflect a bit on what this would mean, you know, going forward for me. Because, and it was what I said earlier, that, you know, it is safe when you're the hero of the story and people just like that. But I know what true change demands, right? And it's not something that I can do within the small capacity of pretending to be the hero, of being, oh yes, the man of the people that wants to, right? And it is a very hard thing, not because I don't get it and I don't know what to do to continue to like maintain like even the hypocrisy personally of like appearing to be something or to do something when I know that I cannot do that. So I know what I must do to effect change. And in a lot of ways, it means to be able to like make a case, you know, in rooms where it's hard to be in, to be able to sort of like, you know, sort of like still be in rooms where, you know, a lot of people that are very controversial are in, but to make sure that the truth of what I bring is not lost in that.
Absolutely.
Right? And people may not be able to see that, but because I believe that very strongly, it gives me the sense of like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. Personally, people will not understand that. Now, to answer your question, one of the things that I've started to do recently is I design chessboards.
Yes.
You know, and so I want to be the man that, you know, designs the most beautiful African chessboards, right, for the world. Right. I think there's a global market opportunity. Chess is a game that is played by 500 million people globally. It is loved. It has a lot of history. And I'm like, what if we could imbue the African story into these boards and sell them globally?
Yeah.
Right. And we use
I see people do lots of things with chessboards. Like,
yes.
So like,
yes.
why,
so it's like, why not
yeah.
like we design something that captures the essence of our culture, of our people, our story. But there's a meaningful thing behind it that underpins it, which is that we can now use that, you know, to support, you know, children, build schools, you know, create a lot of this change that I want to see, you know. And the more I started to think of that, the more I was like, yes, let's do it. And I did it. I designed it. And of course, you know, the people that can afford to buy something like that, you know, are the people that
I feel you.
So it becomes hard because I must be able to, again, live in this paradox where I don't care about famous people. It doesn't do anything for me, right? And
especially at this point.
Especially at this point, right? Because I don't need to be famous to do what I love, to do the small thing and the little things that I love that actually bring me joy. But I also understand that I must be able to sort of like maybe play the game, right? To get what I need, like to do what I believe in. It is a very hard world, and unfortunately, you know, people would always bunch you together when you need to do something. Like for example, now, like when I like one of the people that bought my chess was I delivered to was someone that was very like polarizing, right? And again, there was some reaction. It's like, see, yeah, you know,
yeah, I think I guess to the point where you're also a businessman.
Yes,
you know?
yeah, I'm a businessman, right?
Yeah,
and
like,
and obviously, like to a degree, like we need to sort of like curate the optics and to ensure that I'm removed from that. But before that would happen, right, I have to first represent, you know, the brand that I'm trying to sell, that I'm trying to push. And it will get to a point where it takes on an identity of its own that I can remove myself from that gap. But it is almost impossible. And most people would argue that because they will never have the perspective that I have now, right?
yes.
And that is the truth. And because I now have skin in the game, you know, I must do the hard things to bring about change in the world. Now, that is different from being compromised. I cannot be compromised because I know what my values are, what I stand for, right? But then I have to do this.
Just to crystallize that question, are there certain rooms right now that you wouldn't walk into? Are there people that you wouldn't meet?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And
so there's a line.
Oh, of course, there's a line.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'm not going to meet with people, for example, that I know that these are people that, in a lot of ways, hurt people, right? And again, a lot of it can also be subjective, right?
Indeed.
It can be subjective, but I have a personal line, definitely, that I always have to draw, right? But also, I understand that to a degree, right? You know, everyone has the different ways in which they're perceived by the world, and people always have a bone to pick. It doesn't matter who you are,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely.
So, but then I would never let that deter me.
Absolutely.
But I would also have like my own personal line that helps me, you know, make my decisions on
do you have people who you trust? Is this a decision that is for you? Do you sit with yourself and say, this is my decision, you think, you rationalize, and you make that decision? Or do you allow people into that decision? Are there people that you trust, who you listen to, whose opinion? Because it's subjective. And subjectivism can also multiply in a sense. Like both of us can make a subjective opinion or have a subjective taste rather. So how do you shield yourself? Because you naturally have to shield yourself from the larger world.
Yeah.
But sometimes some people let a few people in. Do you have people in that inner circle whose opinion matter to you?
I think yes, of course I do, but with time it has also become increasingly difficult. Right? Because now when you're out there like this, you have practically become a billboard. People want to be seen and they want to sell through you. And that is one of the
Yeah,
worst places to be,
yeah,
as a human.
yeah,
Right. And it makes discernment a lot harder.
yeah.
Right. Because now it's like you become almost paranoid, almost even apprehensive of people. And to really find meaningful connections, you have to show vulnerability. And in giving you that vulnerability to people, always comes at a cost. Right?
Absolutely.
It does
Absolutely.
come. So, but one thing that has really helped me is I have mentors, right, that I talk to. Then I have a lot of friends that sort of like knew me even before this fame happened, and they also keep me grounded.
That's
They're my
great.
guys, and
That's great.
I completely value their opinion
That's great.
over others. But it has also made me almost a bit guarded about new relationships now, right? And because I meet a lot of people every day, I know a lot of people, but it's hard to like deepen any of those relationships.
I feel you.
So
I feel you.
it is extremely hard, which is why in a lot of like cases, celebrities you see them, they're only within circles of other celebrities, and you see them sometimes a lot of that relationship morphs into something really dark sometimes because they can only enjoy a limited amount of things now, right? They can't in a lot of ways be seen in public, they can't do some things in public anymore. So that secrecy allows for like something like insidious to sort of like grow.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm not that famous and I don't ever want to be that famous, and I'm not sure if it's something I can really help and as I continue to progress on my own journey. But for me now, it has now become important that I choose, that I just wait for things to come to me or people to come to me, that I now look by myself and decide that I want to be friends with this person.
I see
I want
that.
to,
That
so I now
sense.
learn to now choose my relationships, and
makes
that sort of like
sense.
helps you reframe like how you now find people that are worth being in that circle for you, rather than just waiting for people to come to you, because you cannot. It will be harder to judge their motives, but when you choose for yourself, it helps you have like a better frame, like to choose the value system that you share, and it helps you to be more trusting and to bring them into your vulnerability. And in doing that, you build a meaningful relationship with people you can trust.
Beautiful. So I would have two more questions.
Okay.
First of all, fashion.
Yeah.
Looking at your brand in its entirety, I mean, the cap is very distinctive.
Yeah.
You say something about that, but I think there's also some depth, because we see the kids, is there any? I mean, I think there's depth, but maybe you tell us with the kids. Like, do you think dress makes any statement? Because you bring these kids from the slum, and you instantly just dress them almost as if you're like from now on you're no longer the slum child. You're now this.
Now
so
one of us.
What do you like? What does fashion mean to you in that sense? Like what's
of course, like it wasn't at the beginning. It wasn't like being fashionable in its actual sense. Now the fila has like its own like traditional story. Like for the Yoruba people, the fila is like a cultural staple. So it's like when you style it to the left, So before social media and before you could slide into the DMs of Instagram bodies, so people needed to know you were single or married. So at like events, when you wear the fila like this, so when you style it to the left, right, it means you're married. When you style it to the right, it means you're single. Me, I'm not married though, but I just like to style mine to the left. So it was like a style marker in some sense, but also a way for people to know, at events whether you are single or married, right? So the fila is a traditional, piece for like the Yoruba people. Now, one of the reasons why I started wearing this fila was back in 2021. We did a project in a place in Lagos called Oshodi Underbridge.
Yeah.
Now, Oshodi Underbridge is the criminal hotspot for when you think about some of the worst like thugs, like thug problems in the country.
Yes.
That's like the major hub.
I wouldn't go there.
Like, you can't even go there at night. Like they've killed people, stabbed people, robbed people. So right. So one day I decided to go there, and I had an idea, right, to teach children under that bridge how to play chess, because we forget something very important, that nobody becomes a thug as an adult. Or the word is area boy. Nobody becomes an area boy as an adult.
Nobody becomes an area man.
Exactly. So it begins. There's a journey where
Yes.
innocence is lost.
Wow.
And
Yes.
something much darker replaces it. But there's a time in which that happens. So I guess what I was curious about is that how did this happen? For a child to lose their innocence completely and become this thing in society that we become so afraid of. This thing that we complain endlessly and bitterly about. The area boys that are used as, political fodder, like they're used to disrupt elections. They're there in the corners and the crevices, doing horrible things, and how is that innocence lost? What do I need to do about it? What can I do about it? And I went there and I took a few chessboards and I saw the children, hung up on drugs, battered.
Yeah.
You can see their faces. They've lived a very hard life, and some of them are orphans. Poverty underpins everything at the end of the day. But I was like, this cannot be the only story about them. There has to be something new that we can find out, about their humanity. Right.
And at this point, you weren't thinking about like social media.
No. Of course not. Like nobody knew.
Yeah.
Like I just was very deeply curious about this inequality that existed in society and why we needed to discover tell a new story through a different lens of empathy. Because the only story we knew was that, this street children good for nothing. Don't go near them. Don't do this.
Yeah.
But then a society like that is afraid of a child that is lost, right? It will be judged on that very specific premise. It will be judged by what it does for that child. It will not be judged by what it does for the privilege for the have.
Yes.
It will be judged by what it can do for that child.
Yes.
And I had a deep empathy for that situation because I know that, because I come from a place where children like that, like I was in some way a child like that too. And a child who is not embraced by society, by the village, will burn it down to feel its warmth. That is just the truth. Next 8 months, we're there every day with those kids. We taught them chess and we made them superstars. And for the first time in the world, for the first time ever, a new story was unearthed about these children, about the area boys. And people from all over the world came to Oshodi Under Bridge, right? Patrice Evra came to Oshodi Under Bridge. The Canadian embassy, like CNN, people from all over came to listen to the stories of these children, where the most dangerous hub in Lagos had become a classroom for an intellectual revolution. And people came to learn chess from them, and it became one of the most remarkable projects that ever happened. And I remember when we wanted to do the final tournament for the kids, we needed something to crown that effort, something that shows that these children had gone through their personal evolution, something that sort of like crystallizes it, in a very visible form, right? And we decided, look at these kids that are homeless wearing tattered clothes. And that is how the Western media even likes to depict the African child. You see that imagery of like the child with kwashiorkor with fly on the nose and tattered clothes. So I wanted to completely challenge the perception, like to dignify the children, to show the real embodiment of what they have become and how chess had given them an intellectual identity, how their own intellectual effort had given them a new kind of identity. And the best way to represent that is to dress them nicely.
Beautiful.
They now put the feel on it.
Yeah.
Because now when you see them, they no longer look like street kids. They now look like what they can become. They look like respectable people in society. And that is why we wore the cap for them. And from that moment, 5 years ago, I started to wear the cap myself. Right? That every time I do that, I now represent these children that come from these places. So every time, to me, it's like a superhero with his cape. Okay, with his cap. So every time I wear the cap, I'm Tunde Onakoya, the advocate that speaks, to help these children find a place in the world. But the minute I take it off, I'm just Tunde. So it helps me also separate the burden of the work that I do from who I am away from it. Right? So that is why I always wear the cap.
That's beautiful.
Right? So the carrying the cap now, it signifies wealth. And that is the new journey I'm on, that I want to build wealth in the world, that can actually change the world in a meaningful way. So the wealth, the wealth here, you see is shadowed by the cap. Right?
Yes.
So it is both things that now have to exist now for me to I believe, to really fulfill my purpose in life.
That's beautiful. I mean, it's been a really intriguing conversation. But in a minute or two, like, are there things? I mean, we see the things you're doing.
Yeah.
We see the plans for the future. You're speaking about the chessboards, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we don't know about that you're comfortable sharing now that we can expect to see in the coming years?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and which is why I've been so excited on this trip.
Okay.
You know, because I'm going to build like the first like chess center, you know, in Africa. I'm going to build it in Lagos. So I'm trying to create like a center for chess, and everything, you know, all the elements of chess, you know, has to be represented even in the design of the space.
Wow.
Like, it is going to have a lot of like different spaces, like a chess museum, you know, like a chess merchandise store, like a chess cafe, like a room where people can, because I believe chess is a universal language that connects people. So I want to create a space where people can come together and find a new kind of like quiet intellectual conversation, right? I think it's important now to really push and advance this, right?
Absolutely.
Even like with the revolution of like AI changing the very fabric of society, the one thing, right, that becomes now, intelligence is on tap, but the one thing that has now become completely expedient is the ability to think critically. So I think chess, you know, is such a practical way to help people, you know, become critical thinkers, become more critical in their thinking. And it's something that we've lost to distraction of social media. So I want to create communities around the world, in Paris, in London.
You have to do something in Paris, man.
I want to build a community of thinkers, of dreamers, of chess players, right? I believe chess can truly impact life. It has changed my life. It has given me a way to see the world. It has helped me. I use it as a social intervention tool, you know. But beyond that, I want to build a global community of chess players around the world, you know, for the dreamers, for the doers, and we can always converge over a game of chess, enjoy this beautiful game and the gift that it gives, you know. But beyond that, you know, have something new to like define our lives, our philosophy. So that is one thing I'm working on. Of course, design valuable products and services around the world. I want to use chess as a tool to change the world in my own way, because that is my talent. It's what I can do better than most people in the world. And I don't know what all of this will mean yet, but I know that if I'm able to do this successfully, right, in a way that truly matters, then I can use that and the resource that it creates and the believers that it creates also, right, to help more children across Africa, to help them do great things from a small place, from their own small place.
Beautiful.
So that is
man, it's been really fun talking to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew certain things, like seeing how you move, like you can tell about people that, there's more. I mean, you and Possible, like, really inspire me, because your stories, like, are the ones I look. I tell people about you. I tell people about him, like you especially, like where you have gone with everything that you've done is incredible. And talking to you,
two are incredible, man.
Like, you know what this is about you today. Today's about you, but I mean, like, it's fantastic. And talking to you, like hearing your thought process, I think like lots of the decisions that I didn't also even understand, like on social media, like I have been able to get like the clarity, the understanding I need, and I respect you even more now. So thank you very much for coming on Gravitas. And
I'm honored.
I hope you come back again. I hope we have another conversation when you have even done bigger and greater things.
I love it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.